Cheese. Welcome back, guys, to some more 90s nostalgia and the next part of our month-long series of Goosebumps with number 4, Say Cheese and Die. And what did you think of this book so far? It is every picture tells a story. Greg thinks there's something wrong with the old camera he and his friends found. The photographs keep turning out wrong. Very wrong. Like the snapshot Greg took of his father's new car that shows it totaled. And then Greg's father is in a nasty wreck. But Greg's friends don't believe him. Shari even makes Greg bring the camera to her birthday party and take her picture. Only Shari's not in the photograph when it develops. Is Shari about to be taken out of the picture permanently? Who is going to take the next fall for the evil camera? So, what do you think of this one here?
I was very excited about the Polaroid camera. I had a Polaroid camera, I loved it. I was very sad when you couldn't get film anymore. I missed that. It was a great camera. Now we have phone cameras, which are stupid.
Yeah.
Just upsetting.
I think overall, for me, this one I only gave a 6 out of 10. And probably one of the lower ranking ones for me. To me, there were too many weird kind of decision making throughout this series, and not just like it being like a kid's book.
Yes.
They start to suspect there's something wrong with the camera, and they don't really quite understand it yet, but they think that, like, well, is the camera maybe the cause of what's happening, and or is it just foretelling the future? And there is sort of that.
Bring it to my party
right,
anyway.
Right. And take a picture. The first thing he does, he tests it out by taking a picture of his brother and things like that. You know what I mean? So it just, there are leaps in logic that even for a kid, it would make sense if you think the camera's doing like weird things, play a prank on your brother, or test it out that way, whatever. But they're already at the point where they think it might be causing violence. You wouldn't be doing what they were doing with this camera, and I think that's just one example of a couple different leaps in logic that I think.
Well, I think my biggest problem with this is that Sherry, because I think her name is Sherry, not Shari.
Shari, whatever, Sherry, whatever.
She has a birthday party with, how many kids was it? I wrote it down. 13 kids. There are 13, including her, there's 13 of them. And Daddy is out golfing. That is my biggest problem
That's
with
your biggest problem.
And like, so Mom is by herself, there's no other parents.
Yeah.
13 kids.
I think my other issue
Dad's
with this,
in trouble.
my other issue with this one too is that a lot of them, of course, take a lot of either like stories or just settings or something from well-known stories or myths or horror movies or that type of thing to an extent, and that kind of adds to the charm. It's kind of the point of it. It's not really, stealing ideas, but this one is so blatantly a Twilight Zone episode.
It is.
I don't know if that,
it is, yeah.
It's a little bit too far on that line where a lot of them are like it's paying homage to something that's a more well-known horror trope and putting it in a kid-friendly situation. This is a little bit too much of that, and it doesn't really add enough to it. And overall, this one is
too many plot holes in this for me.
Yeah, it wasn't poorly paced, I don't think, but it just had too many little issues that to me it's one of the lower ranking ones so far.
But I remember they get a new car, his family at the beginning, and the mom says she's so excited because there's a cup holder. It's a pretty badass car.
Yeah.
And the parents take it out for a drive, and they're going like 100 miles an hour.
Of course.
Very responsible.
But that is the one thing that I did like about it is that it wasn't clear, especially in the beginning, whether or not the camera was causing things to happen or whether or not it was just foretelling, because then like Dad was driving like crazy. So you know what I mean? Even if it didn't happen right then, that was a kind of an interesting thing. That was one of the few like kind of really good parts. What did you give it out of 10?
I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Okay, I give it a 6. So anyway, for both of us, I guess kind of more middle of the road so far. But moving on to the next one here, we have The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. And this was odd because, as I said before, there are a couple of these that I really vividly remember reading as a kid. And now, like 20 years later or so, again, there was just those few that I kind of remember. This one I didn't really remember very much.
I know,
but I really liked it.
I remember the cover.
Yeah, but I didn't really remember the story very much.
Yeah. But I do not remember the story.
Yeah, which is odd. So, like, something dead has been here before. Gabe just got lost in a pyramid. One minute his crazy cousin, Sari, was right ahead of him in the pyramid tunnel. The next minute she disappeared. But Gabe isn't alone. Someone else is in the pyramid too. Someone or something. Gabe doesn't believe in the curse of the mummy's tomb, but that doesn't mean that the curse isn't real, does it? So, yeah, it actually, and its premise too sounds kind of campy? Like, is it
It
like
does.
is it just like a kid's version of like the Mummy's Hand or something? You know, like the mummy lives. Yeah, but it actually was really good to me.
This was a great one.
Part of it was that it was chock full of '90s nostalgia in a
Oh
good
my
way
gosh.
with the banter between the two kids and things.
Yes.
And that's it gives a little upgrade just because of like the age that we are and that type
And
of
another
thing.
Cocker Spaniel.
Yes.
R.L. Stein loves small dogs.
Yeah, but what made me
You notice
really
that?
what made me really like this one is that it felt relatable, funny, and it was adventurous and fun. It had kind of like almost like a kids Indiana Jones like Goonies / like vibe
It was
almost
very
to it.
Goonies.
It really like just kind of went that way as far as the pacing, and I do like that until the ending, which we'll talk about. Until the ending, it really didn't rely on the supernatural.
No.
There was very little, like next to nothing supernatural until the last like 5 or 6 pages. And normally in a lot of these, you at least get hints of the supernatural, or you know, it's not just outright in your face. Like it's present.
Yes.
And this, it's not really. The thought of the supernatural possibly being there is present, but the actual supernatural elements really aren't there for 90% of this one. And I thought that made it a little unique, especially in these early ones so far. So
Yes.
overall, like I just felt like it was very fun and fast-paced, like a kid's adventure story.
It was, but then it falls apart. It falls so far down.
I don't think it's
The
quite as
horrible,
bad. I
horrible
disagree a
hill.
little bit. I know you hate
I-
the ending. I think the ending's like, it's not as good as the rest
I
of it.
love
but-
this book.
yeah.
This is the highest rated one I have so far. But the ending just has a lot of problems
Yeah.
for me. Especially, I think, more as an adult. I feel like I would have let this slide
Yeah.
as a kid. But those parents need to go to jail. There are some parents in here that need to go to jail.
Yeah, I mean, I gave this, at first, right after reading it, I immediately wrote down a 9 out of 10. After thinking about it a little bit more, I knocked it down to an 8 out of 10. And I did really like it, but 8 out of 10 still ties it for my top spot with the Monster Blood and Stay Out of the Basement. So it's still one of my favorites so far, and you give what, like 8 also? 8.5?
8.5.
So you give it a little higher.
I really, really like this. But the dad has a problem, uncle has a problem, parents have problems, child, oh my gosh. As an adult, you just can't let that slide.
Yeah. So overall, there are a few issues, but you know, it really isn't present till the very, very end. I think
Yes.
the rest of the first
Oh, yeah,
90%
no.
is fantastic. But I'll get into the last one today. Letsget Invisible. So disappearances can be deadly. On Max's birthday, he finds a sort of magic mirror in the attic. It can make him become invisible. So Max and his friends start playing Now You See Me, Now You Don't, until Max realizes that he's losing control, staying invisible a little too long. Having a harder and harder time coming back, getting invisible is turning out into a very dangerous game. The next time Max gets invisible, will it be forever?
We can only hope.
So, yeah.
We can only hope.
It was some of the characters I did find kind of annoying in this one. A lot of times there are certain kid characters in here who I really enjoy. Either it's something where I see some of myself in them, and I kind of imagine myself as a kid in their shoes, or there's just a trait where I really like the sarcastic, snarky like characters. Sometimes I like them. Here, I really didn't find anyone I really liked. You know, I did like
This was a very, realistic. These were very realistic children.
They were in that, especially the escalating game of chicken, especially between like the brothers and the friend, and then there's always like that one kid who it doesn't really want to participate, but they're kind of there. I always
Why are you
have
pointing
like
at me?
yeah, that would be you in that
Saying
situation.
this is stupid.
Yeah. And then you have, of course, there's always that, there's like, if you have a big group, there's always that one girl who always tries to be one of the guys, you know, and you know what I mean, like participate in that competition type thing. Like, it was very stereotypical, like, a grouping, but fairly realistic portrayals of the group dynamic, and that was done fairly well, but overall, I just didn't, I don't know, I thought the characters they were well done and realistic, but they were just like kind of annoying kids. Like, they just weren't that great, like, and on top of that, I really didn't get a sense of either the sort of comedic playfulness that's in a lot of them, it wasn't quite there, and the sense of dread wasn't quite there.
Yeah.
And even from the perspective of trying to keep in mind, we were both trying to read these, like, and remember back being kids, how we would have thought of them being a kid, you know, trying not to be like the adult mindset, you know, looking at these, but kind of nostalgically and thinking about being a kid. But even as a kid, you know, I remember not really liking this one, and I remember why, because it doesn't, again, it's not very memorable in the humor, and it's not very memorable in as far as really invoking that sense of horror.
I feel like it would have been better towards the end. We see an entity in the mirror.
Yes.
And I feel like if this was flipped a little bit, with like a different perspective, this could be a very scary book, and for children, appropriate for children. But I feel like this could have been a much better story had we had that story instead of this story.
Yeah, because
like
it's still
weak.
Overall, like it wasn't outright terrible because I do say like again the group
Yeah.
dynamic and everything was done well, so I did give it a solid 7 out of 10. Like it wasn't just like downright awful. But
7
like,
is fair.
Yeah,
it's
so
just it's not what it could have been.
Yeah.
For that and those boys. Those boys.
But yeah, so that's the next 3
boys.
Goosebumps here, and we have 2 more coming up next time. So make sure you check back tomorrow because we're doing every single day throughout October is going to be Goosebumps of some kind. Moving on to the next 2 Goosebump books.